Shalom Aleichem, and welcome back everyone as we, Baruch Hashem, have another opportunity together to prepare for this week's Parashat, being Parashat Ki Tisa. Parashat Ki Tisa, the most fascinating of Parshiot we have here in the Parashat about the sin of the golden calf, the Egel Hazav. But the Parsha starts off about collecting a half a shekel from every single Jew. The Parashat tells us, Ki Tisa Rosh Bnei Yisrael Lifkudehem, where you're going to count the Jewish people. They're all going to give an amount. It's going to be kapara for them. La Hashem Bifkodotam. When you count them, lo you have a negative Bifkodotam. There's not going to be any problems when you count them. So there's an issue about counting. Stam, you're not allowed to count. So you give machatzit shekel. So what do? Ze yitnu kola over al pekudim. Anyone who goes through the counting, machatzit shekel. Shekel HaKodesh. She gives half a shekel in the holy shekel. Esim Gerah shekel, Mahatzit shekel tirumah LaHashem. He gives it as a tirumah to Hashem. As I was preparing for the parasha, I stumbled upon an old Divrei Torah that was written for Kilat Shem Tov, my father's shul in Brooklyn, in the year of 2012. At that time, we were very closely connected to the Rav HaMachshir of the Vada Kashrut of Flatbush, a very prestigious kashrut organization. And at the head of that kashrut organization was Rabbi Meir Goldberg, Zechat Tzadik L'Bracha. And Baruch Hashem, my brother Yosef and myself were able to work with Rabbi Goldberg on numerous of projects. You can actually find on YouTube, we had a video series of how to clean the house for Pesach, the kitchen. He did a whole video series before videos were becoming, everyone was doing them. This is going back 10 years ago or so, more than 10 years. And he used to write for our shul a Divrei Torah every week. And so I was preparing for this parasha, I came across this Divrei Torah and I thought it was an amazing piece to share. So he brings down these psukim that I just quoted. Everyone should bring a mahatzit shekel. And he says there's two reasons why you want to count with mahatzit shekel. A, we said, counting anything of value can inspire jealousy. People see you're counting a lot of hundreds, they're going to get jealous. It puts them under the ayin hara. Therefore, you give a half a shekel, and somehow that protects you. It's a kapara, it protects you from ayin hara. He says, second reason, we know that bracha only comes in something that's hidden. When something is hidden, bracha can happen to it. When it's open, not so much. So we didn't want to count the Jewish people to remove the bracha from the Jewish people. So the Jewish people are hidden, and you count through a machatzit shekel. However, he says, there's actually a third danger. He says there's a third reason why we give machatzit shekel. A different type of danger. He says, as long as a nation unites, as long as there's a am, that everyone is together, HaKadosh Baruch Hu overlooks their averot. When you have ahdut, there's less punishment that comes to the group. It's the way it is. He says, if every person has to be looked at separately, you can find a lot more flaws. If you look at everybody as a group, it's harder to see their flaws. That's why I say it's good to pray tefillah b'tzibur. You're praying together in a minyan, the package comes up and they look, nice tefillah to let through. If you're going to pray alone, they're going to look at your prayer, who you are, where you come, everything exactly. So he says, if you pay attention, Hashem says to them to give how much? Half a shekel. Why half a shekel? Give a whole shekel. Why half a shekel? He says each person was being told that you're merely a half of a nation. Meaning that in order to be somebody, to be a whole, you can't be a half. Each one has to work together. To be a mahatzit shekel is to tell you're only worth half. Because in Judaism, in the nation of Jews, there's no such thing as you're by yourself. It doesn't work that way. In order to get anything done, it has to be two halves. I saw over here, they asked the question, Moshe Rabbeinu was confused about this whole Mahathir shekel. That's what Midrash says. Moshe Rabbeinu was confused. So Hashem went and showed him a fiery half a shekel. I don't know how that explained anything, but that's what it was. That's what the Midrash says. Now, we understand already Mahathir shekel is half a person, right? Just like when Adam Arishon was created, he was actually half man, half woman, right? Back and front. And then Hashem said, it's not good to be alone. Give him a partner. And he made a separate woman and separate from him. And what happened? They made Avirah. They were going to be kicked out of Gan Eden. Finally got kicked out. Motzei Shabbat. It was Motzei Shabbat. They were kicked out of Gan Eden. Now what happens? Adam Arishon gets very scared. It starts to get dark. It's the first time he ever saw darkness. Because the whole time that they were in Gan Eden over Shabbat, it was light the whole time. Right? He was created on Friday. He had Shabbat, and with Shabbat light the whole time. He got scared. So Hashem put into Adam Arishon to take stones, flint stones, rub them against each other, and make a fire. So a great Admor said as follows. You know why Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu a shekel, Mahathir shekel on fire? He says in order to make fire, if you have one flintstone, you can make a fire. Can you make fire with one flintstone? You can't. You need how many flintstones to make a fire? You need 2 stones. You need to rub it against each other. And we know that fire represents the superiority of men, right? We're able to create fire, which is heat, which is warmth, which is able to produce cooking. That led to the Industrial Revolution, to electricity, to everything that we have today is based on fire. And the whole thing, how does that happen? It has to happen with 2. It all started with 2 stones. When every Jew understands that he's half a shekel, he's half the package, then when they work together, they'll have unity, they can get everything done. That's what the Mahathir shekel. That's why he showed him a fiery Mahathir shekel. So Rav Goldberg, continues, and he says as follows. Sometimes, unfortunately, we lose sight of the importance of unity, to everyone to be working together, that the survival of the Jewish people has to be done together. And here he brings a true story that happened to him. He says, he was at a meeting of a group of community Rabbanim to discuss an issue of concern to all segments of the Jewish population. Present at the meeting were Yeshivish Rabbanim, Hasidish Rabbanim, Sephardic Rabbanim, Mizrachniki Rabbanim, Modern Orthodox Rabbanim, all groups of Rabbanim that were there. And he says they were trying to decide a certain matter that was concern for everyone, and they weren't getting anywhere. Everybody was sticking to his guns, everyone was sticking to their opinion, their perspective, and the meeting wasn't going where it should have gone. And it was a lot of argument, a lot of discussions. And he says, I got up from my seat and I walked to the back of the room and I'm thinking, what could be done? What could be done? And he says, as I stood there, a thought occurred to me. So I returned back to my seat and I waited for a minute where there was no one talking. And when that happened, I said, listen, I want to ask everyone a question not related to what we're talking about here. He says, listen, Chashavei Rabbanim, imagine the following scenario. It's a nice Shabbat afternoon in the springtime. The weather is picture perfect. Hundreds of Jewish men, women, and children are walking along Ocean Parkway. And over there are some men wearing knitted yarmulkes. And over there some women wearing sheitelach. And over there a group of Hasidic children and the parents working. And over there is a group of men with their bend-down brim hats and trim beards from the local yeshiva. And we're all having a nice, enjoyable Shabbat afternoon. And all of a sudden we look up, and he says here, Yamach Shemoy, Hitler was there, and Hitler is driving down Ocean Parkway in his armored vehicle. And he's riding with his one of his generals, and he starts to point at a Hasidic child, and at a bearded man, and a fine-looking yeshiva boy, and he starts to scream and giving orders to his soldiers to shoot them. And the armored vehicle suddenly stopped, and the soldier points his gun at the first victim. And he says, at this point, when I'm in the middle of telling the story, one of the Hasidic Rabbanim jumps up and says, "It's ridiculous. Can never happen. Stop making up Baba Maisis. What are you making up stories for?" And one of the other Rabbanim then stood up and said, "Rabotai, Rabbi Goldberg is saying, yes, it's far-fetched. It's not going to happen. But his point must be taken as well." And he says, "Rabbi Goldberg, do you have anything else to add?" And Rabbi Goldberg says, "Yes. I want to read to you the psukim we already read here." He said, when you count the Jewish people, everyone has to give a mahatzit shekel. They're all but a half. We're all just a half. To have unity, that everyone realizes they're just part of the half. But when you're all together, you can create fire, you can create so much, you can do so much, you can be so strong. And when all the Rabbanim heard that, after a few more minutes, they took a vote, and Baruch Hashem, all 22 Rabbanim that were in attendance, who up until this point could not agree on a single matter, all agreed and voted in the same way. And there was no more machloket. And he says, as we were leaving, the Rav, the Hasidic Rav, who accused me of making up the story, said, "I have to tell you, when you were telling the story in such graphic detail, I thought that the soldier was pointing his gun at my child. I saw it in front of my eye like that. And therefore I said, you have to keep quiet. I can't hear it anymore." And he said, "I agree. If we start separating ourselves from each other, we will have no future." All for one and one for all. This is what the Parashat is teaching us. Ki Tisa Rosh B'nai Yisrael. It's a Mahathir shekel. Why Mahathir shekel? Because we're all but a half. In order for us to survive, in order for us to be strong, in order for us to have together, we have to realize that we're just one part of the nation. And it takes all of us together to get the job done. We're going to move on to another lesson from this week's Parashat. In this week's Parashat, we have Moshe Rabbeinu is coming down with the first set of luchot, knowing he's been told that the Jews are doing an Averah, they're sinning with the golden calf. But the Pasuk tells us an interesting lashon, Veiten el Moshe, kechalato ledaber ito b'har Sinai shnei luchot ha'edut. Moshe Rabbeinu went up after the Aseret HaDibraot, when Hashem spoke all the 10 commandments. Moshe Rabbeinu went to get up the luchot. And we're told that Moshe Rabbeinu was up in Shemayim for 40 days. And every day he was learning, he was trying to learn, and he couldn't remember anything of his learning. So Rashi brings down from the Tanchuma as follows. The word kechalato is spelled without a vav, to tell us kechalato, like a bride. What does this mean? That the Torah was given over to Moshe like a gift, as a bride is to a groom, because he was unable to learn all of it in such a short time. The Midrash Rabbah states as follows. Rabbi Avoh said, throughout the 40 days that Moshe was in Shemayim, he learned Torah and he forgot it. Moshe said to Hashem, Master of the universe, I've already learned for 40 days. I don't know anything. So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give? What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He gave the Torah as a gift to Moshe Rabbeinu. The question that all ask, the Al-Shech asks it as well, Al-Shech asks it as well. If Moshe was going to give to Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah as a matana, as a gift, kekala to a hatan, then why did he make Moshe Rabbeinu go through this whole ordeal of learning Torah, forgetting it, not remembering it, and after 40 days saying, Hashem, I don't know anything. Just give it to him. Give it to him as a gift. The Al-Shech HaKadosh answers that Torah cannot be acquired without work in it. You have to toil. You have to work on it. Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the greatest of all the teachers of Klal Yisrael, it was he himself that had to go through this ordeal to teach us all that you have to persevere. You have to just continue to try. A person's job is not to be successful in spiritual endeavors. His job is to put in the effort, because success in spiritual matters, in the end, is dependent on the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the prime example for everyone as the teacher par excellence to show us that you have to do is learn, and overcome frustration. Even if it doesn't make sense, I'm forgetting everything. The Midrash in Shir HaShirim Rabbah teaches us as follows. There were two workers, one a fool and one a wise man. They were approached by a rich man, and he requested for them to pour water from a flask into a wicker basket, a basket with a bunch of holes in them. And the fool refused. He said, what's the point of this whole thing? I'm going to take the water and put it into the wicker basket. It's all going to slip out. What do I need it for? And the wise man said, I'll take the job. He said, the man told me to try, and he's paying me for trying. That's all I have to do. That's all what I have to do. He told me to put it in, that's what I'm going to do. The Midrash says it's the same thing with learning Torah. A fool says, you know what, I'm not learning. It's too hard, it's too much. I'm never going to remember everything. So many books, all these books. Every day they're making new books. Every day there's something new. Every summer something else. It's too much for me. And he stops right there. But he says, my job is not to remember everything. My job is not to get through everything. My job is to do my job. Kadosh Baruch Hu said to learn Torah, I'm going to learn Torah. However much I remember, however much I don't remember, that is up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara in Nida says something amazing. That when the embryo is in the mother's womb developing, an angel comes and teaches the Torah. And as soon as the child comes out of the mother's womb, he makes him forget everything. He strikes him on the mouth, and he causes the child to forget all his learning. The question can be asked, what's the point? Why make the child go through this learning the Torah? In fact, they say that there are angels there who not only teach the Torah, there are more angels who make sure that the Yetzer Hara doesn't come into the womb to get into the baby. So you have angels protecting the baby, you have angels teaching the Torah to the baby, and then the baby comes out and he forgets everything that he's learning. What's the point? He says the task is that the Torah needs to go into the person. That's the job, just to bring it into the person. Additionally, once someone learns Torah, right, even though he forgets it, now you don't have to start all anew. You already have it once, so it's easier to get to it, right? I say, I can't learn Torah, it's too hard. What do you mean? No, you already learned it all. You just have to review it. You know Hazara now. You already learned it all. The Sefer Hasidim gives a very comforting thought. It says anybody who tries to learn and he has difficulty and he never really understands it, in the end, he should still not be discouraged, because when he comes to Olam Haba and he sits in the yeshiva in the Shemaim, he's going to understand everything, and he's going to be richly rewarded for his efforts. Our job, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, our job is to go in and to learn, to try our best. And in the end, the reward will be great. There was a student struggling in the yeshiva, and he wrote a letter to the great Rav Yitzchak Hutner, Rosh Yeshiva of Masifter Rabbeinu Chaim Berlin, and the yeshiva wrote it in his sefer. They wrote it in his sefer, the Pachad Yitzchak. And he writes back to this boy, he says as follows. He said, if you would have sent me a letter that everything is going good by you, I would say I got a good letter. But now that you sent me a letter saying you're having difficulty and setbacks and pitfalls and failures and tests and hard times to learn, I say that I got a very good letter from you. Because it shows me that no matter how hard it is, you yearn to come closer to Torah, to mitzvot, that you have the spirit of an Adam Gadol in you. And then he says, Rabbi Yitzchak writes to this boy and says, listen, I want you to make one thing certain in your mind. When you see Gedolim B'Yisrael, right, don't think that they just were born that way. All of a sudden they grew up Gedolim. They were just amazing people from the start. He says that you should know they had Yetzer Hara, and they had difficulties, and they had problems, but they continued and continued to fight and work and try, and that's how they ended up being so great as they were. The Khatam Sofer, and his age, a certain boy came to the yeshiva and said, he was already 17 years old, and he came to the Khatam Sofer and he said, listen, I want to learn Torah. And the other boys in the yeshiva at that time started laughing. They said, you never learned Torah before. You don't even know Alpha, you don't know nothing. Now you're going to start to learn. What are you going to be able to do? Why are you even trying? And the Khatam Sofer said to those boys, don't make fun of him. Whoever wants to come and learn, let him come learn. So the Khatam Sofer arranged for this boy to learn. Now this boy didn't have just a problem for being a late starter. He didn't understand. He didn't have a head. His head didn't work. You talk to him, kak devol. You didn't understand what he didn't understand. He just sits flat. He doesn't understand anything. But his desire for Torah continued and continued. That after the passage of time, he became an outstanding Torah figure. He ended up being a dayan in the Mahathir stuff, in the city called Mahathir stuff, under his Rebbe, the Khatam Sofer. And so much so, the Khatam Sofer quotes this dayan many, many times in his sefer. What happened? How did he do it? He persevered. He just continued. It's hard. It's difficult. Yeah, it is hard and difficult. But that's what Torah is. Torah is, you continue. Rav Hutner once shared a story to Rav Aaron Kotler. He said there was a Jew in Lithuania. He was looking for a shidduch for his daughter. And someone said there's a certain yeshiva student. He had a lot of yirat shamayim, and he tried, and he would learn all day, but he wasn't a very smart boy. He would be all day learning, but he didn't remember anything. His head was very, very not good. He had bad memory. He said, should I let this marriage go? Should I let it happen? So he went to the Rav of Brisk, Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, and he asked him. And Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin answered as follows. He said, Hazal teach us in Pirkei Avot, whoever fulfills the Torah despite being poor, ultimately will fulfill it, the Torah, even in its wealth. And he says, what does poverty mean? The commentaries say poverty means intellectual deficiency. He doesn't have good brains. It's not happening for him. If someone studies Torah despite having a weak mind, he will be ultimately granted a new capacity for learning in wealth with a mind that's amazing. And he'll be able to gather so much Torah. And the Rishua Leib Diskin said to this man, let this shidduch go through. And true to the Tzaddik's word, the young man became a great in Torah. He became the famed Rav, known as Rav Yosef Zundel, the author of the Chedrei Deah to the Shulchan Aruch and other Sefarim. How? Because he persevered. It's difficult? Okay, it's difficult. You continue to go. The story goes when Rav Hutner finished telling us to Rav Aaron Kotler. Rav Aaron Kotler quickly ran away from him, and he went to find him, and he found Rav Aaron Kotler crying. He says, why are you crying? And Rav Aaron Kotler said, this sort of wealth that you're talking about, if you learned it with poverty, you learned it with wealth, I've never had the opportunity. Rav Kotler had an amazing head, so he felt bad. He said, if I would have had a poor head, I would have been able to learn a lot more. And for this, he wept. We'll end with one more story on this topic before we move on to our next topic. The Hazon Ish was very old already, and one of his students came to visit the Hazon Ish. And Hazon Ish was resting on a bed on his porch, and he couldn't go out to open the front door. No one else was at home. So the young man wanted to go to visit the Hazon Ish. He wanted to come in. So the Hazon Ish said, climb over the railing. Come over. And this guy tried to climb over. Each time something else, his jacket got caught on the railing. He had to go down, and it was difficult. Finally, after many tries, he succeeded. As he got up there, the Hazon Ish turned to this young man and said to him, that's how life is. We try and fail, but if we persevere, eventually we will succeed. And this, I believe, is the message here from this pasuk, telling us that Moshe Rabbeinu got the Torah as a gift, as a kalat to a hatan, because he did not give up. As the Pirkei Avot tells us, know that your employer can be relied upon to pay you the wage of your labors. Not the wage of your success, but the wage of your efforts just to try. And it applies to everything in life. Everything that's especially spiritual in life. Person's job is to go and try and do and do and do, and eventually HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help him completely. Let's look at one more lesson, and I think all the lessons are very important, but this one speaks volumes and volumes, and is so important for us to always remember. In this week's Parashat, like we mentioned in the beginning, we have that the Jews were waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu to come down. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I'm coming down on this day. And the Jews calculated and they were off by a few hours. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't come down and they got scared. And they went and the Erev Rav went and they built an Egel Azov. Rav Yaakov Greenwald has a sefer, and he writes the conduct that he saw by the Stipler Gaon. Rav Yaakov Greenwald, in his sefer, he writes things about ta'ut, mistakes that are common by people. Common mistakes that people make all the time. He has a whole list there. And somewhere on his list, the last one on his list, he brings one which we see all the time. And my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Reisman Shlita, quotes as follows. He talks about an error, a mistake that people make in attitude. People have this thought as follows. For every problem in the world, there has to be a solution. Some sort of resolution, some sort of proper answer. And if a person doesn't find the answer, then he's in a terrible situation. And this is the attitude people have. You have a problem, you need an answer. You don't have an answer, you're having it bad. Be it financial issues, health issues, shidduch issues, whatever it might be, he feels he needs to have a solution. And Rav Greenwald says that this is a mistake. To think that every problem needs a solution is a mistake. He says the truth is that many times problems do not have a good solution. Teiku. Very good. You don't have. He says, what are you supposed to do when you don't have a good answer? You're supposed to go to sleep on it, so to speak. You have to wait. I don't have a good answer today, so I'm not going to do it. We just move on. But human beings tend to feel that we need to have a solution to a problem. We have to have some sort of solution. We must solve it. And therefore, people make bad choices. They make mistakes. They think blindly. They're grasping for a straw from somewhere for something. And this is a huge mistake. He says this is exactly what happened by the Egel. The Jews had a problem. They thought Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to come down at a certain time, at the 6th hour of the day. And the 6th hour came and went. Yeah, and the Satan showed them pictures of Moshe Rabbeinu's Levaya going up in Shemayim. And they quickly went to make an Egel. What type of answer is this? The Erev Rav made it, fine, but the Jews were quiet about it and let them happen. But why did they do this? People should have said, we don't know what happened. We don't know what we're seeing. We don't know what happened to Moshe. Maybe. No. Instead of waiting and figuring out what happened, in a state of bahala, a state of confusion, they went and tried to find a solution. They went and made something. We have to do something. That's what people say. We have to do something. You don't have to do something. If sometimes you don't have the answer, you're supposed to do nothing. They went and they did something. We have to learn in life that not everything has an answer. Like Rav Yosef said, you learn Gemara. How many times the Gemara say, I don't know, Kushya, Teiku, leave it, we don't know the answer. And the Gemara doesn't stop and say, that's it, it's all over, we can't move on. No, the Gemara continues learning. Tosafot, Rashi, I don't know, we don't know. It's okay not to know. It's okay not to know. You go on, and eventually Eventually, you'll figure it out. Reisman, he was talking recently. He says that the yeshiva bachrim sit in yeshiva, in some yeshivot, not all yeshivot, in some yeshivot, they're trying to learn Gemara, and they're so stuck on the first page of Gemara, they have a million questions, and they can't move. He says maybe if they went a few pages down the Gemara, they would see the answers that they had on the first page. Right? A lot of times you just need life to kind of continue moving along, and the answers will come more apparent. The person will daven, the person will try, he'll ask other people, he'll find out, he'll have a good resolution. It's okay not to know. Don't trade one problem for another. In life, if you have a difficulty, say you have a difficulty, I don't know an answer. Don't make a decision from a state of bahala, a state of confusion. Don't make a decision when you don't know what to do. It is not a good idea. We have to learn to live with a question. In fact, Rav Galinsky, the Chassidut Bracha, brings a certain idea as well. He says the whole episode of Adam HaRishon and Hava ate from the tree. The truth is, the Zohar tells us if they would have waited just a few more hours, Hashem would have let them eat from that tree. From the Eitz Hadat. Hashem would let. The fact is that they would have, but no, they couldn't wait. Right now, instead of just waiting just a little bit to figure out the solution, I want to eat this. Hashem said no. Maybe I can talk. Maybe I can ask. Maybe I can wait. No, we're going to eat it now. He says, how do you deal with the Yetzer Hara? How is a person supposed to deal with the Yetzer Hara? He says there was a big cafe, a kosher cafe in Paris, in Paris. And a Jew went there, and he was shown the prices, very expensive prices. And at the bottom, it was written, pay today and get a free meal tomorrow. So I said, you know what, it's worth it. It's a lot of money. But okay, tomorrow I'll have a free meal. So he did that. He bought a lot to eat. He ate. The next day, he comes back for another meal. He sits down. The waiter says, by the way, you know our prices, right? He says, I know. It says eat tomorrow, eat today. Tomorrow you get a free meal. He says, but today is today. Meaning you always have to pay. And tomorrow is not really here because today is today, so you're going to have to pay. Rav Galinsky says this is how a person is supposed to deal with the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara comes, and the Yetzer Hara only can get people in a state of confusion. When you're in Bahala, you don't know what to do. Person's in a bad mood, person's like that. Now he tells you to come and say this, do that. The Gemara Masechet Sotah tells us the Yetzer Hara only comes to a person when he has the Ruach Shtut, and he's not in his own mind. If a person was thinking correctly, he would never come to sin this way. Rabbi Yezer Tzvi of Komarna recorded this about serving Hashem. Yetzer Hara comes and wants you to do a certain avera, a certain bad thing. Tell him, I have to think it over. Right? Once you'd say this, he's going to run away from you. Because the nature and the way of the Yetzer Hara, he comes at a time when he's busy, when something that's just not able to think. If a person's thinking straight, he won't come to sin. This is the way of all the Sha'im. When they have no Yeshiv Dat, they're old, confused, busy, running, and not able to think, the Yetzer Hara comes, it makes them do a sin. The Chacham is, wisdom is in his eyes in his head. What does that mean? He says, let me stop and think. Let me think about this. You don't have to act on impulse. You don't need a quick and immediate solution to everything. But Rasha, the fool, he goes in darkness. Why? He runs below without thinking it over. That's what he does. So someone once asked me when I was sharing this about Torah, but we have Zrizim Magdilim Mitzvot. You have to rush to do mitzvot. So I said there's a big difference between Zrizim Magdilim Mitzvot and what we're talking about here. Here we're talking about a state of confusion. Person is in Bahal, he doesn't know what to do. You don't know what to do, you don't do. When it's Zrizim Magdilim Mitzvot, it means you know to do a mitzvah. Don't be lazy, do it. You know what to do. It's when you don't know what to do, then don't rush to do anything. He says over here, Now, when the Stipler Gaon was conscripted into the Russian army, he was given guard duty one Friday night. They told him you have to be the guard from midnight until morning. And it was during the height and cold of the snowy winter of Siberia. You can just imagine. And if you would stand still without moving, a person could freeze to death. It was that dangerous. The guard on duty was given a thick wool coat to keep him from freezing. So the Stipler Gaon reports to duty Shabbat night, and the guy who was there, the soldier before, or the guard before, he finished the watch. He didn't wait for the Stipler to come, took off the coat, and hung the coat on a tree, waiting for the next guard to come. And the Stipler came. He saw the coat hanging from the tree. He trembled. The halacha is clear. A Jew cannot make use of a tree on Shabbat. So what to do? So he starts thinking, it's pekuach nefesh. Pekuach nefesh is mutar. You're allowed to do what you have to do. But he said, one second. It's not pekuach nefesh right now. Meaning, I have 5 minutes. I can handle 5 minutes without wearing this coat. And then he said, you know what? I can do another 5 minutes. He stood there without the coat for 5 minutes, another 5 minutes, another 5 minutes, and another, until morning came and his guard duty was up. 5 more minutes. All you need is to give yourself a little bit more time to figure out what to do. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu would give you the strength and the resilience of what a person needs to do. The Vilna Gaon, he says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a lot of times we call him Koneh HaKol, right? He's what we usually translate this as mean, Koneh HaKol, he possesses everything. It's Koneh, it's Kinyan of everything. But the Gra, in his Parashat Shmona Esrei, says that Koneh is the Lashon of Mitaken, to fix something. He says as follows, HaKadosh Baruch Hu repairs everything. He's Koneh HaKol, not just he owns everything, he repairs everything. This world has a way of fixing itself. When you have a kasha, you don't have a resolution, you have a problem. Leave the problem to the Koneh HaKol, the fixer of all problems. Who is this? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rav Reisman ends up with one more idea, which I think is fascinating. He says, he was once reading an essay by a doctor, a physician, a research physician, of the name Lewis Thomas. Lewis Thomas wrote an essay entitled The Great Secret of the Doctors. And listen what he says is the doctor's greatest secret. He said, this is from Lewis Thomas, is that people come to the doctor with a problem, and the doctor tells them, drink water, get some rest for 3 days, then come back. He says the reason this is done, because the doctors don't really have the answer, but most problems fix themselves over within 3 days. And so in 3 days he comes back and it starts to look better, we know we're okay. So they tell him, drink fruits, rest in bed, good eat meals, stay away from the cold, whatever it might be. But the secret is that problems, even physical problems, resolve themselves. Therefore, the lesson of the ego is if you have a kasha, you have a question, you have a problem, you don't know what to do, you wait. Don't choose bad solutions. This, I believe, is something so important because a lot of people, especially young people, think they have to do something. They think they have to go and choose something. The truth is you don't have to. You have to wait to figure it out. You have to consult Da'at Torah. You have to know what to do. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless us all. Make sure to remember these 3 lessons. The first lesson is that we're all just a half. In order for a nation to be, we have to all be united, all connect, and we can be like fire. Our second lesson, that in struggles in spirituality, all that you have to do is to try. Keep trying, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will make it work for you. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu forgot all the Torah he learned, and Hashem gave it to him as a gift. And our third lesson is that when you don't know what to do and you're in a state of confusion, don't try to figure it out on your own and make wrong choices, but rather wait, give it some time, 5 more minutes, a few more hours, and the Koneh HaKol, the Mitaken HaKol, who fixes everything, will fix that problem as well. And with this, we'd love to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.